Lots of people coming in. Hello, and thank you all for joining the BIMXT Network. My name is Dana, coming to you from my home office in Virginia. For those of you who do not know me, I'm a BIM technologist at SmithGroup, an active participant in many BIM-related groups such as Your Desk University, BIM Thoughts, etc. So with BIMXT Network in particular, there are 5 user groups along the East Coast that have come together to bring you this network, run by a board of advisors to help guide the meetings. Essentially, our hope is to provide a forum for people to share and connect on processes and tools related to building modeling. As a side note, these meetings are recorded, so you can find this in the future on our website as well as previous recordings. And when I say website, I mean LinkedIn, which I will bring up as well. So on that note, LinkedIn, I know Allison is going to be really wonderful and throw in the chat. I see her smiling. She's doing it already. So you can join our LinkedIn group already. In this place, like I said, we can definitely collaborate together. You can see any resources related to the presentations that we have. So, if I shared a Dynamo script, I might throw it up there, for example. And of course, the recordings of past and the current one will be soon, the recordings of the meetings. Today's presentation is on model coordination from different perspectives. So I'm super interested as someone that's not typically engaged too much in the model coordination process. So from the different perspectives, we have Kevin Keeler from SmithGroup, one of my colleagues, super lucky to work with. He's essentially the Navisworks guru or model coordination guru in our team. We have Ava Norton, who has been a long-time participant in the DC advisory board for the Revit group. Very, very lucky to have her today. She's with Clark Construction, and we'll be talking about clash detection, issue tracking, coordination metrics using Navisworks, BIMTrack, and PowerBi. Next up, Laura Kaiser of our very own. She's on our advisory board, so you may have seen her name a slide or two ago. From Clancy and Thay's construction company, we'll be talking about how coordination is happening through Glue, Clash at Navisworks, and reviewed in Revisto. And last, of course, but not least, we have Jordan Chandler with Harper General Contractors, who will be talking about the setup, functionality, tips and best practices, as well as a few limitations, which we all love, of BIM 360 Model Coordination app. So before we get started with that, of course, today we have a randomly selected winner. Thank you everyone who filled out the survey. Make sure you fill out the survey this month to make sure that you can enter into this raffle. This month it looks like we have William Skinner. So Allison or somebody from the CAD Micro Group will be reaching out to you for your $25 gift card. Thank you so much again for your feedback. We really, really do value that. So please make sure that you fill out the survey. I know Allison, once again, will be wonderful at the end of the presentation and share that link with you as well so that you can do it right as you're done with the meeting. Make sure you get that done. One other thing, or a few other things I want to mention. I created a YouTube channel, Dynamo BIM, and my first content piece is coming out tomorrow, where Asan and I will create a functional tool within Revit utilizing Python. So please, if you have not already, subscribe. I'll make sure I'll share that channel in the chat. Also, Your Desk University, their spring semester is out. There is 2 coming up, essentially one every week, but the next 2 that are coming up, VR optimization in Unity and topology, theory and application. So make sure you check out the Your Desk University website and their YouTube channel, of course, for all of their previous and future content. Last thing, please make sure that you're utilizing the chat tools within Zoom. We will definitely utilize that for discussion. We do want this to be a conversation with not only our presenters and panelists, but with you, our participants, the group of experts on the call. So with that being said, I will jump over to Kevin Keeler, once again, SmithGroup BIM technologist.
All right.
Hey, Kevin, how's it going?
It's going good. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate that.
Thanks
I'm going to do a share screen here with you. So real quick, just a little AU style. Who am I? So Kevin Keeler, BIM technologist with SmithGroup, BS in civil engineering, focus on structural. Was a practitioner for 7 years, went to consultant side of the thing, and got brought back to SmithGroup as a BIM technologist, focusing mostly on BIM workflows and 3D coordination specialty. So this is one of my favorite topics, especially from the design firm, because this is something I always hear, right? Navisworks, that's a GC tool. Why would we want to talk about 3D coordination and Navisworks in a design environment? So I ask them, well, why are we waiting to coordinate, right? Why wait to coordinate? My design firm's process and adoption lessons learned here is what I'm going to share with you guys. So easily, we all live in the environment, the design environment, right? So we're day to day in our authoring tools. These are producing 3D models, producing our drawings. Very simple workflow, very traditional workflow with Navis. It's an export out with NWC combined into a federated model, very traditional. From that standpoint, what are we doing with the federated model at the design level? Well, we're doing what the rest of the guys are going to tell you they do as well. Visual walk inspections, we walk the floors, we walk the ceiling sandwiches, we use automated clash detection and review markup. And it's all well and good, and we hit a roadblock from the design firm because we're a design firm, not the GC. And what happened was we realized just doing this wasn't enough to connect to our users, because the users are living in the design environment. They're not necessarily living in the 3D coordination environment. So we kind of really hit a roadblock on how to get the coordination results we were finding to the people that need to edit the models. Once we upload to the NWD to BIM 360, it opened up a whole new environment and solved our problem. And that is the connection with BIM 360 issues and Navisworks. So there's a direct plugin to Navisworks, if you're a Navisworks user, that allows you to create, view, and manage all of your BIM 360 issues out of your Navisworks model. And what is great about this is all of my authoring software users were BIM 360 users, right? So what we can do now is we do the reviews in Navisworks. We do all of the legwork, all of the review in the program that is meant to, but then we take all of the results and migrate them over to BIM 360, where all of my authoring software users love to live. So now we are talking their language, right? And from there, we can take that into team meetings. This is pre-COVID meeting picture. Nobody yell at my firm about it. But you can take it to a team meeting, let the models drive the coordination conversation. And ultimately, what are we trying to do? We're trying to find the coordination elements to fix the authored software and send the drawings out more coordinated. Now, in a design firm world, what we have to think about is that our world is different than what we're going to use these tools at from the GC. So along the way, this has been about a 5-year journey of adoption at the design firm, whose traditionally focus is just to make design intent documentation, using a model to do so. With BIM, we're supposed to be more coordinated. The realization is we weren't always checking and coordinating ourselves. So we are now employing Navisworks and the practices that the GC teams utilize Navisworks for to do that. So if you are a design firm, I'm going to share 5 years of exploration with you and in a couple things to help you along the way. And the first and foremost is that we are using the same tools, but a very different mindset than the rest of the folks on this call are going to explain to you. And you have to understand that if you just apply a GC or a VDC mentality at the design level, it's not going to go very well. I promise you that. So different model, same tools, different mindset. What do I mean by that? Our models at a design level have a completely different requirement and a completely different purpose than the GC pre-construction models do. We have to take into consideration LOD differences. We have to take into consideration spec items, not modeled items. And how do you coordinate in that environment when just running 100 zero clash results and fixing all of them isn't going to really work for a design team? So what do I mean? Again, like I said, we hit a roadblock in our exploration to bring in 3D coordination because I was trying to apply the VDC mentality of running clashes and giving my design team hundreds and hundreds of clashes and saying, hey, you have to fix all these in your model. The reality of it is, in design intent modeling, LOD, not every clash is something we're going to have to fix. So what we decided is to take, instead of giving hundreds of clashes, giving pinpointed action items through BIM 360 is much more effective. And also a big one we learned, not all of your BIM users need to be Navis users. We need to make the results accessible. And when I say we had an aha moment with BIM 360 Issues app connecting the two worlds, it was a huge step in the progress, because now my users do not have to need Navis to view the results, but they can still take the results and work with them. And lastly, this is a big one because I know all of the design firms out there, we have the pretty picture mentality. We want to see the full rendered 3D models. And I always am having this conversation with my designers to let them know that Navisworks isn't pretty on purpose. It's not meant to be an Enscape or a Lumion rendered 3D viewer. It's meant to be a system to system coordination. And we want it to look very different system to system so that things stand out to us as a review software and not as a pretty picture software. And I have to explain that a lot to folks in the design forum, just because that's the environment they're used to living in. So just wanted to go quick here. I'm not going to use my whole time. I'll catch up on the chat, but I wanted to share a journey with you from a design environment and let you guys know that Navisworks and 3D coordination is not something for after the drawings go out the door and let the rest of the guys do their coordination. Make sure you're coordinating your 3D models. Better models mean better drawings, mean less RFIs along the way. It's a whole life cycle.
You got it right. The good old garbage in, garbage it out motto. With that, I do have a question for you, Kevin. Maybe you can elaborate it. There's some chat within the panel there. What would you suggest for someone that wants to do coordination within Revit in this way? You know, I mean, I can say, you know, and maybe a preface to that we at SmithGroup use Enscape quite a bit for,
Yep.
you know, walkthroughs and things like that, just to kind of see visually obvious clashes, right? But maybe could you talk to how one could coordinate within Revit, or maybe some of the limitations of why you wouldn't clash within Revit?
Obviously, Revit is our 3D authoring software. There's plenty of ways to view in 3D, but as all of you Revit users know, it can be laggy. You'll get a lot of buffering. So what we employ is other tools that are lightweight 3D viewers, such as Navisworks or, like Dana mentioned, Enscape. And so the design or the setup we have is our users do work in Revit and do day-to-day coordination in Enscape, which is a direct connection to their Revit model. If they make a change in Revit, it automatically makes the change in the 3D viewer. And then we do a quality control review, like a high-level VDC review using the Navisworks workflow. And so I think a combination of the both allows our models and then ultimately our documents to be more coordinated and more flushed out than they ever have been in the past. We have
what would you say are the advantages of that? I mean, obviously we're seeing, you know, during construction, a lot less of RFIs, right? So the construction phase is being cut down in time, money, etc. But so, maybe what are some others?
So the reality of it is, ultimately the design firms still produce documents, and there's still ways to make the documents look correct without having the model correct. And I'm sure our VDC folks on the call will tell you about plenty of models that had a good drawing set, but didn't really work. Our goal is to eliminate that fact from our work. So we are checking ourselves. And the main goal is just that, is to reduce RFIs, reduce time. Most project teams get off of the project, it goes to construction, and the team is much more reduced. Questions and problems are a lot harder to answer in a CA world versus in a design world when the whole team's engaged and you're really thinking of it. If we can catch these problems now, and especially, God forbid, an unbuildable condition we build, then we're going to save a lot of time in the long run for everyone.
Absolutely. Now, with that being said, and before we jump over to Ava, go ahead and throw out a few polls here as we typically do. First one, our generic one, right? Where are you joining us from? Sorry, presenters, you probably won't be able to submit your response. If there's an other, or maybe not as specific as you'd like, we'd love to hear where you're calling from. Like we're in Europe. Love to see that. A lot from what I'm seeing. We have one person in Canada, one person in Europe. Mostly we're seeing from the Northeast. So I'll go ahead and end that and share the results so you guys can see there. I'd love to see in the chat where you guys are calling from in particular, I guess the two out of the US. Or if you weren't able to respond, throw it up in the chat. The other one that I would like to throw up here is, what is your discipline, right? So we have Kevin, who's actually a structural engineer on the BIM, he's a BIM technologist. The rest of our team is going to be in construction. So what are you, would you identify in terms of your discipline? If you don't see it on there, would love to see what discipline you represent. We definitely want to make sure we have them all accounted for. Like, what are the three of you that are responding other?
Kevin's Koolaid. I'm branding that from the chat, guy.
There you go, Kevin's
It's a real thing. I promise you. I'm not drinking the purple Kool-Aid yet. It's really happening out there. I know it's a foreign world to be talking about 3D coordination in the design forum, but you build 3D models, and the whole idea of BIM is to be better coordinated. So
absolutely. So
it's not that fake of a thing.
40% architecture, 20% construction, 20% MEP, 9% structure. So pretty good split, actually. Pretty happy to see that. All right, and the last poll before we move on once again to Ava. Do you use, I guess we should have used like none. Maybe you don't coordinate at all, but hopefully you do. I guess if it's none, just put other, right? Like I'm in a other category of not coordinating my models for whatever reason. And then if it is other, please let us know in the chat what types of tools you're using, whether that's Revit for interference checking, or it looks like on my end, I'm seeing a lot of Revit. So it's about split between Navisworks and Revit, which is incredibly interesting for me to hear and see. All right, we got 40 seconds on that. I'll share the results. So just by a tick, Navisworks wins. That's really interesting. So, but it looks like probably you're using the combination, right? Because obviously the numbers don't add up. There's multiple choice. So most likely I'm guessing that you guys are ticking both, right? That would probably be my assumption. But please, I'd love to hear, looks like we're getting some Flypaper, the Sherlock plugin for Navis. I love those guys. I interviewed them on BIM Thoughts. If you haven't heard about them, check out BIM Thoughts. Procore plugin, Struction Site plugin for Navis, Ecodomus. Okay. All right. Well, without further ado, Ava Norton with Clark Construction.
Thanks, Dana.
Thank you, Ava.
Let me know when you can see my screen.
Got it. Oh, and look, it's a SmithGroup building. I love it. For those of you that do not know, that's the African American Museum in Washington, D.C., Smithsonian. Very cool.
So thanks everyone for having me. A little bit about myself. I graduated from University of Tennessee. I worked for 3 years at an architecture firm in multi-residential housing in DC before I moved to Clark, who I've been with for over 6 years now. In my spare time, my husband Hamid and I walk our COVID puppy Fendi a lot. That's what we've been doing these days, hoping we can travel more. But it's been good in the meantime. All right, so I'm going to first get us started off with Clark's typical process in Navisworks. For the contractors on the line, some of what I'm going through is going to sound really familiar or almost identical to some of the processes that you all use. But the focus is really about how we use it in pre-construction and offering review to the design models prior to IFC. So what we first start out with is really just looking at high level, all the clashes in a particular zone that we've highlighted. So we're looking at examples of what clash detection looks like before you do anything with it. And I think everyone on the call is familiar with this. Towards the end of coordination, when we're in more granular issue tracking, like hangars and things like that, we may still look at it like this, but we like to lump it together and look at more high level in the beginning. And the way that we do this is really to just pull it all together by one zone and create a group. And then we work backwards by deducting similar issue types together. And the way that we do this in design is really looking at program type, not necessarily system type like we would in construction. So in this particular case, with this model, we're looking at a unit because we really want to understand all of the major clashes just within the unit. In a large, let's say, hotel, we may be looking at a larger room. But what we do from there is use the inclusive tool to essentially grab all those clashes and then break them outside of the larger clash group. So this is a really quick way within just a few clicks to start isolating clashes without having to go through them individually. So we're really just looking at them by program. And what we do from there is, and this is going to be similar to some of the other issue tracker that Kevin was referring to in BIM 360, but we use a tool called BIMTrack, which I think many people on the call have heard of. And what we do with that is essentially the groups that we've created, we then push those clash groups to BIMTrack. And from there, we really encourage the design team that we're handing these issues over to filter by what they deem is important. So in this particular example, we're just looking at the clash type or the clash test, and then we're filtering by the zone. And then what we do is really just prioritize those issues and then walk through them in meetings or generate reports from them. So that, again, we're not just focusing on, hey, there's a big duct clashing, but it's like, what does that look like within this particular space? How can we inform the movement with that? The last thing that we do as a standard that we've been moving towards, I shouldn't necessarily say standard, but we're doing more of, is taking the issues in BIMTrack and then transitioning them over to PowerBi. And what this allows us to do is over time start to see the aggregate of issues. So in this particular project, we're looking at 613 and we're starting to see some charts, and we've got over 100 of issues that have been prioritized as high, which isn't super helpful. But if we then start to filter down by a zone and then also filter down by priority, we're able to really start to focus on specific issue types and specific issues that may help us to close out the majority of the issues in that particular zone. With this type of dashboard, and when we're using it into construction, it also helps us to see trends on what particular subs may be having lag in the issues that they're trying to close out, which helps us to talk with management and really understand, hey, is this a schedule issue? Is this a manpower issue? What are the things that we can do to help make this better and help us close out these zones? And the last thing to note for this particular tool, again, very similar to issues in BIM 360, is if we target those specific number of issues that we were looking at in PowerBi, we can then use the view and model tool, which again looks very similar to the BIM 360 issues, but this also works in Revit and AutoCAD. And we found that it's much more palatable than giving just a static report to our designers or our subs, just encouraging them to pull it into Navisworks or pull it into their native modeling environment so they can then solve those issues in real time. That's it.
Eva, that's not just it. That was a lot. A lot of information. Thank you so much.
Yep.
It was like beautifully demonstrated in such a way that you didn't feel like you were being blasted with information, but you were. Thank you so much for all of that.
Yeah, for sure.
So next up, we have Laura Kaiser, as I mentioned, our very own on our advisory board. She's with Clancy and Thay's Construction, I believe it is, Laura.
You got it. Clancy and Thay's.
Not without looking.
Very good. So a little bit about myself. My name is Laura Kaiser. I am an architect. So I worked in architecture firms for about 13 years before coming over to Clancy and Thay's about 2.5 years ago. So a lot of what Kevin was talking about, thinking about how to coordinate during design and Navisworks, I know I looked at quite a while ago and never really got to it. Once I got into construction, I kind of realized how much I actually could have done more efficiently on the design end to help once it got to this end of the process. So what I'm going to talk about today is the process we're using here at Clancy to kind of do model coordination, spatial coordination that we all really think of when we hear clash detection. So first, how we're acquiring models. We're then merging in Glue. We're clashing in Navis, and finally reviewing in Revisto. So a little bit about Clancy. We do have 5 locations here in the Southeast. We are headquartered in Raleigh, which is where I'm located. So working in all these different markets also really helps our VDC team look at how we can implement technology best across different areas. So, you know, comparing our Raleigh office to Newport News, we get a lot of subcontractor models here, not so much in different areas. So it kind of informs our workflow and helps us get some practices that can be applied across multiple offices and multiple project types. So kind of step 1 for us is to get models from the design team. So I know Kevin talked a little bit about 360 docs. We are using that too as far as to store our files. We have found some advantages to that. One is that other team members outside of VDC can actually view that, and it really helps to kind of get the model beyond just one specific place. So you can see here we're kind of separating it out, how we're still working on this, tweaking the structure here as to how we save models. One thing we have noticed for those of you that are Revit users out there, in terms of uploading a Revit model to docs, to upload it natively through the Revit like save to cloud method gives you a lot more control. You know, you can see here that we only have the default 3D view because it was just directly uploaded. So just a 360 docs quirk there works better when you actually go through the Revit process. But making this model accessible to everyone, we think is really helping to get technology just beyond VDC. Okay, so we've got models from the designer. Now step 2, we're taking models from subcontractors and we're merging them in Glue. Now we are only using Glue for the actual merging of the models. So we're really only using it for like a little teeny tiny piece. The biggest benefit though to that is that then we have models that are always updated. So if my mechanical sub wants to see what the plumber has just uploaded, they can see that without me having to do anything in the background. And it really kind of helps kind of keep things moving without us always having to step in. That's the biggest benefit we've seen. I'm curious to see what Jordan talks about with the 360 model coordination. It's something that we've looked into. It wasn't quite right as we've looked at it, but things obviously have changed with it. So I'm curious to see that because like I said, we're only using Glue for a little tiny piece, but the benefit makes it worth that license cost to us for subs to be able to get in there on their own. So we are exporting out models from the design team to Glue. Subs are responsible for uploading theirs. It is nice that I can come in here and see like anything, like when it was uploaded. So if I'm preparing for a meeting, we really know what's been uploaded when, and we have a little bit more control over that. So Glue, we're gonna go ahead and just kind of take a look at where things are. Another little Revit tip, I spent a couple years just doing Revit support in an architecture firm up in Baltimore. So Revit is kind of my thing. I'm obviously learning all this other technology now. But another little Revit tip, the BIM 360 add-in for Revit has just an export to Glue that has been really helpful for us. We do have subs working in Revit among all kinds of other software, but this helps them really easily just push that model out to Glue. it helps to keep things updated more frequently. Okay, so now we've got design models, we've got subcontractor models. I think also to kind of touch on the subcontractor model aspect, kind of related to a little bit of what Kevin was saying, is subcontractors are going to model things that an engineer could never think to model. And it's going to differ between different companies too, as far as how it's going to be installed in the field, what type of fitting they're using. So there's all these different variables that we're looking at in models during construction that you could never even start to consider in design because you just don't know. So that's kind of one of those other differences that we're looking at when we're coordinating models at this stage. So we're now in Navisworks. I think Ava's and Kevin's descriptions of Navis are very similar to what we're doing. We are sometimes identifying clashes. I use Navis a lot as just a heat map, especially early on in a project. So then when I hop into Revisto to run my meetings and to track issues, I already kind of know where to look. And then I go back to Navis kind of as a check. And like I said, because we are using glue, you can, in Navis, open the model directly from glue. So those subcontractors that are doing their own internal coordination, they can update that, open that updated model in Navis and see the most recent things. They might, as we can see here, just send me a screenshot. I still think 2D marked up screenshots, definitely have a place in this process, so we can see the issues that they're identifying. So when we do meet, we can talk about issues that affect a lot of people at once. Okay. So step 4 of our process, now that we have, I don't know, any of you that have used Revisto, we have started looking to kind of exporting clash reports into Revisto. We've done that on a few projects. So Revisto is fairly new to kind of our technology stack. We've been using it for about a year now. So we see a lot of possibilities with it. And each project we're kind of implementing more and more as we go. So we are using it for our issue tracking, specifically in our VDC department. The rest of our office is starting, as some other people have mentioned here, are using BIM 360 docs for issues. So we've tried to look at integrations with docs, but are still just sticking to Revisto. So when we think about moving in here, the VDC team is exporting out a federated model from Navis to Revisto. One of the big advantages we've seen here is the ease in which we can overlay 2D sheets on top of a model. So here we were doing some underslab coordination with some conduit routing and some sanitary. So we can actually, without having to do any manual alignment, because the designer provided us a Revit model that still had the sheets intact, that way it can be automatically aligned. It gives us a really good picture of what's going on. We can really easily go through in a meeting. So when I'm running a coordination meeting, I can stamp this mechanical duct here has an issue with something, and then I can go and fill in information. This is ending up turning into our meeting minutes, an attachment to our meeting minutes. So we can kind of keep a running conversation. We're trying to get more subs on board and into the program too. And that way, we can kind of assign issues more easily. We've also got our field team is using Revisto to keep an eye on the model too. So that's been pretty exciting to see it actually being, different uses out in the field as opposed to what we'd already been doing. Here's an example of just pushing out those issues as a report. I attach this to my minutes and it's done. If someone does have Revisto installed, they can open the issue directly from here. So it's been a really easy way for us. Plus, I think it's way clearer than trying to export. In the past, kind of before I got here, they'd exported out viewpoints from Navis, but it's hard to get all this information in there. It's been really helpful to make sure we're keeping track of everything. And like I said, we're always looking at kind of what other pieces of technology we can implement in here. So here's an example of the model in Revisto. We were really intrigued by Revisto also to include drone scans, 360 photos. Like there's a lot more benefit just beyond issue tracking for us for this program. So here's an example of the model with a drawing overlaid and then also the drone scan. So we can look at how, we can start to incorporate all these different pieces that we have into our coordination process. A lot of this goes into like sleeving drawings for slab penetrations, things like that. So just kind of looking to see how we can incorporate more and more into coordination and get that model out to everyone. Yep, and that'll do it.
Thank you so much, Laura. And I agree with Dan. The chat is extra spicy today. Make sure you guys are putting your comments, your questions, anything like that. Keep it coming. We love it. So last, we have Jordan Chandler with the Harper Group. Let you set up your presentation whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Tina. Okay, you guys see me okay?
We got it.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name is Jordan Chandler. I'm the virtual building manager at Harper General Contractors. We serve the Carolinas, basically, both on the general side and environmental services side. I've got a few minutes to talk to you about a contentious subject. So I'm going to try to cram some information in and hopefully get you kind of walk away with some beneficial info. I'm going to try to focus just on the BIM 360 model coordination aspect. There's a lot of pieces and parts that you've already heard about earlier that all tie into that. But basically, the few things that you need to start using model coordination would be BIM 360 docs. That model coordination lives inside the BIM 360 docs platform. So you've got to have access to that. Additionally, you would need to enable the model coordination service. And once that's enabled, create a coordination space. And a lot of people get hung up on the coordination space and how to get the data in there. So I want to try to give you kind of a behind the scenes on that as quickly as I can. But essentially, if you're used to a glue workflow or you're coordinating in Navisworks, off of a server folder, this coordination space is equivalent to setting up that project in glue or setting up that folder on your server where all of your data is going to reside that you're using to coordinate. The coordination space is simply that folder just within the BIM 360 docs environment. So you're telling docs, I want to use this folder, it's located here, and model coordination will go pick the data out of that folder and run some of the coordination tasks. And then obviously we need to put some data in that folder to coordinate. And I believe as of now, that data that we can use there are RVTs, DWGs, and IFCs as far as file type. As for the functionality, so this is just a quick overview, the glue workflow. I think probably most people are familiar with that, but you've got some design authoring software, pretty much any 3D format. Glue's really good about accepting 3D formats. And then you push it up to the glue server. You can merge those models, create clashes. You can pull it into Navisworks, go back and forth, etc. Model coordination from a BIM 360 perspective gives you a lot of flexibility. So we'll try to give you an example of that. You can set it up so that it virtually mimics the glue workflow. If your team maybe isn't working inside of BIM 360, or you've got a different file exchange, for example, you could set up a coordination space inside of BIM 360 and simply have your collaborators upload or publish their data to that folder, similar to like they would push up to glue, and then you can use the BIM 360 coordinate platform to run through the coordination process. And as of recently, you can now also use Navisworks in that process to open up those views, to push issues back and forth, etc. And then just kind of speaking to the flexibility a little bit more, there's dozens of ways that you can set up this workflow from inside of Coordinate. For example, if your team is all working inside of a BIM 360 Docs hub and your data is already there, maybe you've got cloud-hosted Revit models or work shared models, your CAD files are saved there, you can automate or almost remove that step of having to regularly push or upload data, whether it's to glue or to a specified coordinate folder location, just by using the automatic features of BIM 360 Coordinate. And again, that's just pulling the data in. You can use the other functionality of Coordinate then on that data as it's updated live, as people are saving files. Speaking to that, basically from a Revit perspective, I think a lot of coordination in some way or another comes back to Revit and some other file types. But another place where a lot of people get hung up is how do you get the data from Revit to model coordination? And you can do a deep dive on that between the plans folder and the project files folder and how those interact with Revit models. But recently, Autodesk gave the ability to use, you can set up that coordination space now in both the project files folder and the plans folder, or either one, it doesn't matter. And so that added to the flexibility of the workflows. So you now can have your Revit model just hosted as a cloud model in your project files folder. You can set up specific views for model coordination, put those into a view set, and then either publish those views to work in model coordination, or I'll show you later, you can actually set up a federated model in your coordination space to pull all the other data in. And from there, the views that you're seeing here, kind of listed down on the last slide, are all of the views that were in that publish list. So any of the 3D views that you've got set up that get published, get listed or get brought into model coordination. And then this is kind of the clash feature. So the automatic clashing is a lot of what you hear about when people talk about BIM 360 model coordination. And all that really means is they're taking each view and telling you if they're comparing each view with each other view and telling you if objects are taking up the same space. And out of the box, if you just dump all your views in there, it's a lot of information. It's almost too much information. And I think it turns people away pretty quickly. But if you start digging down into the options and drop downs, you can actually create some views that only contain specific, when I say views, think of like merged models in Glue. It's the same kind of functionality where you're basically creating a view inside of model coordination that maybe only looks at all of the level 1 models that were published. And so you can start to sparse down the clash data to where it actually makes some sense now. Now we can look at it and get some good feedback like we would through Navisworks or some of the other coordination functions. And then inside of those merged models or those views in model coordination, you can start to look at where you've got clashes, and it'll list out either you can clash structural versus all of your other trades, or maybe you just want structural versus plumbing. Either way, you can use the drop downs to just kind of identify what you want to look at. One of the really nice features that we've gotten a lot of value from in model coordination is that it automatically groups clashes based on either object, system type, or I remember the third one is off the top of my head, but that last drop down there lets you automatically group those clashes. And if you've ever had a piece of ductwork running through a floor joist or a truss or something, and that joist is made up of 17 different steel elements, you get your 17 clashes for the duct, and then 17 clashes for the insulation, and then the hanger, and so on and so forth. This kind of cuts down that process, just automatically groups that for you. I think Ava was saying using some of the features in Navisworks to kind of group those clashes. This kind of takes that step out of the process. So that's something that we definitely found pretty valuable. And then once you do identify a clash, it gives you an option. I guess this third part or fourth part of it is the issues feature. And pretty much all coordination platforms have an issues function where you can identify a clash, assign it to someone, track it, whatever the case is. One of the things I, again, kind of liked about model coordination is that you can flag things as not an issue, and you don't have to deal with them again as long as those element IDs don't change. But let's say you flag something and maybe it is an issue. You run down, fill out the information as you would pretty typically with any of the coordination software, and then you can assign that out to individuals and for tracking. And the nice part of that is there's not an introduced third-party software. So we actually use Procore currently, and we do use Glue, and we use a lot of the workflows that have already been talked about. We've just started diving into this model coordination workflow a little more and more over the last year to try to figure out how we can get some value out of it. And then I guess lastly, I just wanted to throw out some tips out there. Again, it's a really flexible platform. There's a lot of ways you can set it up. You can really figure out what the constraints of your project are, what your project team looks like, whether you're on the construction side or the design side, and you can set up the coordination workflow to kind of match that or be the best fit for your team. One thing that we found that was really helpful was setting up, we created a coordination space and then set up a federated Revit model inside that coordination space. And that allowed us to link to all of our design models or detailing models to bring that data in without actually having to create a copy of those models or have people working inside of the coordination space. And so that process was pretty straightforward. I was able to just link everybody's data in, create a bunch of views for all the coordination areas that I wanted to see. And then anytime I wanted to update that coordination set, I could just go in and publish the views, and model coordination would be completely updated from all the separate trades. On the general contracting side, a lot of times we're working with detailers or people that have very different skill sets. Sometimes we get detailers or designers, modelers that are absolute pros and are teaching me things. And then other times, we get people that are brand new to it and just trying to get their foot in the door. So that flexibility kind of lets us adapt to each one of those skill sets. And then again, just setting specific views for coordination. So whether you're using a federated model to push your own views to coordinate, or whether your team is publishing views to coordinate, having good housekeeping inside of their Revit files specifically, and setting up separate views just for the coordination effort, we found is really important. And Dana mentioned limitations. So there are some limitations. There are some drawbacks. It's getting better. They've added a lot of functionality over the last 6 months or so, but a few of the things that we still run into are it's pretty limited when it comes to file types. So like I said, you basically got Revit files, CAD files, and IFC. Luckily, that covers a lot of what we do. But if we're comparing that to the list of file types that Glue can consume, it's definitely a much shorter list. The second thing is publish control, and that's something that I've seen on forums come up quite a bit, but it seems like you ought to be able to control where your published views land. So if you were in a Revit model and you wanted to publish your views, it'd be great if you could say, hey, I want those views to land in the coordination space or the coordination folder. Right now, that isn't really doable, but that's something that, with Glue, you can kind of pick where you want your views to land. With model coordination, it's more based on where your Revit model resides. And then the last tab there, you can set up model coordination where your collaborators can update their models and then go into model coordination and get immediate feedback. I think that's the biggest advantage to Glue, in my opinion anyway, is that people maybe that are outside of our company or across the country in some cases can update their model and immediately get feedback on how that model has changed the coordination model overall. And you have to be really intentional with model coordination in order to get that functionality. It's not something that's immediately there, I guess. But that's as fast as I can go through model coordination in a nutshell. I think it's definitely a good thing. I think there's some people, maybe it got released a little early. People have some bad taste in their mouth, but I would encourage you to give it another shot and check out the updates.
Well, awesome, Jordan. That was awesome, and definitely appreciate your input. I will say, you guys totally listened to me, and the chat has gone crazy. So you as speakers, is there any questions from the chat that maybe you want to speak to in particular that you see? Otherwise, I could start just spouting them out.
There's quite a bit of talk here about sharing design intent models with the GC, and I'm going to agree with what most other people said. I think anytime we can share information, we can generally use it and it will help the project, because we know what to expect from a design intent model. We're not going to take it as, a drawing. We still know to go back to drawing. So I think, yes, it's really helpful to have design models, and updated design models throughout construction, if possible, too, is always helpful too.
Yeah. And Laura, I appreciate you saying that you will know the difference. Unfortunately, there is a lot of people who receive design intent models and get the connotation that, well, you guys modeled it in 3D. It should be 100% solid, zero clash, full pre-construction out of the design phase. And that's not the case. And if you understand what each model at each phase is giving the life cycle of that design, then you're solid. When you get confusion on that, it creates problems. But the more we can share, the better we are. Robert, what you got? I know he was chatting about it. I'm sure he feels the same way. He's on mute. He's on mute. But no, I mean, yes, to the answer to the question simply is, the more we can share a design intent model, it informs the general contractors, subcontractors about what we're doing. And in early pre-construction coordination, they're most likely using our design intent model until a subcontractor comes on board and would replace that information. So let's say structural steel, for instance. Structural steel is a design intent model out of the AE firm, maybe doesn't have connections, base plates, hangers, things that will be showing up once the fabricator gets on board. And when they do, turn off the design model, bring in the sub model, and it's that much more accurate for coordination.
And one of the other features, when I was talking about overlaying 2D drawings from Revisto, that kind of hits kind of what you were saying there, Kevin, is we can see a section and see what steel is modeled, but then also see all the supplemental stuff that isn't going to be modeled by the design team. So having better ways to compare 2D drawings versus model is helpful too in that space.
Yep. And I actually love laying over 2D drawings in my Navis models, because you'll get things like room numbers, room names, door swings that you don't get out of the 3D geometry. So it is a federated model of many parts and pieces. It's not just one Revit export and everything should be there.
What about in terms of the model as a deliverable? What are we seeing there? What do we see at SmithGroup?
So the model is a deliverable. So technically our stance, and I think most AE members on the chat probably will agree, is as of right now in the world that we're still living in, the document is the contracted deliverable. However, we want to share our model as much as possible, because seeing the 3D model and talking in 3D makes the 2D deliverable that much more valid and understandable. Especially you saw the building that Ava put up. We're not building tiny little boxes and squares anymore. We're building super complex, geometric, beautiful designs, and they're not easy to read in 2D. So having that 3D element as a share, not as a deliverable currently, is very important.
What about you guys on the construction side? Are you sharing? Because I know a lot of the time you're probably creating your own Revit models, right? I mean, you're not necessarily relying. Ava, you want to speak to that specifically? Like, what are you sharing with the owner, if anything at all? And I know that a lot of the time the architect is going back and actually modifying our content for the as-built and record drawings, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, we're more frequently getting a lot of requests for models to be handed over, at least for the purposes of record keeping and maybe like retrofit design. On the facility side, a lot of that data is usually exported and imported into a CMMS, but as a recommendation, if we don't want to see an inflation in costs, what we usually recommend is, on the MEP side, we're going to hand over either Revit or AutoCAD 3D files. And the reason that we don't explicitly say we can deliver Revit is a lot of our subcontractors are built to fabricate based off of what they've built out in their fabrication systems that aren't necessarily built from Revit. Some of our subs use Revit.
Are you seeing more and more subcontractors using Revit?
It depends on the sub. I've seen more electrical contractors use Revit, but on the piping side, less so. But we're seeing a shift, but it's not an easy shift to make. I mean, again, their efficiencies aren't just about libraries. It's about It's about model to fabrication.
Exactly.
And so what we also suggest is on the we do buy a lot of structural modeling, but for architectural trades like drywall, millwork, and things like that, we're not necessarily purchasing those modeling services from our subcontractors. So if the owner is wanting to see, an as-built either with integrated data or just for geometrical purposes, we will recommend a hybrid of the architectural model combined with what we can provide from what we purchase with our MEP and structural trades, because we do want to get those to fabrication level for the purposes of coordination.
And what about for facilities management? Is that like way too much information? Like, what you said that your clients are asking for that more and more?
Yeah,
like,
I mean, the standard that I've seen, if I shouldn't say the standard, it really varies a lot, but what I've seen come up more and more is owners which want models with integrated data as a deliverable, to basically say they want BIM light, so they want the details out of the connections and bolts and things like that out, but the data present, because they're less concerned about the flanges and things like that, but they want the data, but they also want so it's basically like you're building it out to like 350, 400, and you're accumulating data, and then you're deducting geometry so that the model performance doesn't have problems on the back end. But there's a wide array of BIM to FM deliverables that we're providing to clients, but we're seeing a lot more of those requirements in jobs these days.
What about the other contract, Laura, Jordan? You guys seeing any requests from the clients or the owner in terms of what you guys are producing on the BIM side?
Right now, we're doing a lot of multifamily apartments here in Raleigh, and I think that end is probably not going to ask for a model deliverable for a while. Mm-hmm. That's just my opinion. So that aspect, we're not really, and I don't see that happening anytime soon. However, we do a lot of work with our county's public school system. They do require a model, but only MEP trades. It's kind of interesting the way it's worded in our contract with them. The designers don't have a contractual requirement for a model deliverable, but the GC does. So it's kind of interesting looking at how all these different kind of owners think about, and I see a lot of chat right now too about like how the model is going to be used by the owner, and is that actually reflected in the contractual requirement?
And I can see, I mean, a high-rise residential, maybe if you have a campus of buildings across Raleigh, and you're having to manage those at a higher level, you wanting to be able to use even the fabrication level models to understand what's in the building, right? Something breaks, you need to replace something, you want to know UPC codes or...
We're doing some 360 photo documentation to kind of address what you're talking about there, Dana. So someone goes into each unit like before drywall goes up. So, and then we can compare that to a photo of completion so that they actually know what's behind the wall.
Are you doing that in like a point cloud type of scenario?
No, it's just 360 photos. Just 360 photos. We've used Hollow Builder. We're getting into open space now. So some different platforms out there. Yeah, so it doesn't need to be a model because, like you said, they want this. If there's one specific thing they need, how can we get that information to them?
Right. And I guess also just capturing the data that comes with it, right? I mean, you're going to lose a lot of that with a BIM 360 photo or a 360 photo. 360 photo. Right? Like all of these 360. But, wanting to know like the electrical panel SKU numbers and model numbers and, having all of that data in one central place. I mean, of course, I'm sure they have their own advanced way of managing their facilities and different things like that. Kevin, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say that working with very large manufacturing teams and working directly with their facility guys, it's usually their goal is to be able to, like Laura said, know where the thing is that I have to go service before I go out there. That's really usually a main driver on a lot of the facilities teams. They want to use these 3D models to inform their facility team when they do have to go service linking in owner's manuals, anything that they can do. And they can either do that. I've seen that in a homegrown system, or I've even seen it just using the URL links within Navisworks and using the Navisworks model that the contractor gave them at the end of the day. So it's, again, everybody's using what software works for them and what skills they have on the team. That's always, not a hindrance, but it's something you have to work with. Not everyone can use every software.
Well, looks like we have a minute left. Any final thoughts from our presenters?
Yeah, I'd say, just to Laura's point about the school systems and the contractors being asked to provide the models, it kind of goes back to what Kevin was saying about the model exchange from the design team to the contractor. We're having those conversations now between the contractor and owner about expectations of those models and what they can be counted on for. So that's
yes.
It's happening a lot, and it's been a interesting process for sure.
A final thought I would have, I know a couple, Kevin's Koolaid was commented, coordinating in the design world is a must. It's not a Kool-Aid concept, right? I mean, the reality of it is, if you say you have coordinated documents and we're building in 3D, why are you, you're giving a quality control page turn on 2D documents and checking for your spelling and for your design. Why are you not checking your coordination and making sure that your design intent actually fits? I promise you, I can prove that if it doesn't fit, there's no way in heck that any of these GC teams will make it fit later. It's not magically going to fit later. Check now, fix it now, coordinate now.
Well, it's a minute after 2, so I'm going to respect everybody's time. Thank you all so much to our presenters. Thank you so much to our participants. The chat was fantastic. Definitely one of our more high traffic chats. So thank you guys all so much. Please make sure you join our LinkedIn group, as well as some of the other learning resources that we have shared with you guys, and hope to see you next month. We're going to share that survey with you. So make sure you fill out that survey, a chance to win the $25 gift card next month, which will once again be in Dynamo Player. So I know you want to see your name in Dynamo Player next month. So thank you all, and we'll see you then.